Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Well, this is your wake-up call. I'm not sure if this video will download in time for it to be a wake-up call, but here it goes. Now let me start off by telling you all that this is not a debunking video. This is not a global warming versus global cooling video. Alright, so for you enthusiasts that are on either side of this argument, this is not what it's about. It's intended to be a thought-provoking video so that you can go and do your own research and actually come to your own conclusion of what you think is going to happen instead of listening to what other people say. Because as you know, some people only speak on behalf of their agenda, whether that is right or wrong. All right. So I wanted to give you a quick article here. This article is actually a few months old. It was written back in February of this year. However, I thought that it was pretty interesting compared to a couple of other short articles that I pulled up. So I'm going to go ahead and read this real quick. And the title of this article, as you can see, is Global Warming versus Solar Cooling. The showdown begins in 2020. And let me just put this out there, ladies and gentlemen. So how many of you on the mainstream media has seen anyone contest that there is a grand solar minimum taking effect either now or starting within the next year or so? How many have you seen? That would be interesting if you can leave this in the comments. How many of you have seen anything in the mainstream media protesting that there is a grand solar minimum that is starting or has started? Because I really don't watch the news, so I really couldn't tell you. But that's why I'm asking you on the comments. How many of you, if you can put it on there, have actually seen on mainstream media channels anything saying that we are headed into a grand solar minimum? Alright, so let's start it off. It says here, this is in reference to this picture right here. These two large black spots on the sun, known as sunspots, appeared quickly in February of 2013, and each is as wide across as 6 Earths. That's pretty incredible, huh? It's said, or I've read, that you can fit about 1 million Earths in the sun. That's how big the sun is compared to Earth. And the article starts, the sun may be dimming temporarily. Don't panic. Earth is not going to freeze over. But will the resulting cooling put a dent in the global warming trend? Since that's a question, I'm going to say definitely. And ladies and gentlemen, I agree with global warming. I agree that the Earth warms. I agree that the Earth cools. What I personally disagree with is the reasons that the mainstream media tells you why the Earth warms. So here we go. A periodic solar event called a grand minimum could overtake the sun perhaps as soon as 2020 and lasting through 2070, resulting in diminished magnetism, infrequent sunspot production, and less ultraviolet radiation reaching the Earth, all bringing a cooler period to the planet that may span 50 years. The grand minimum event, a disruption of the sun's 11-year cycle, is actually about 11.2, 11.3 year cycle of variable sunspot activity, happened in the mid-17th century, known as the Maunder minimum. It occurred between 1645 and 1715, during a longer span of time when parts of the world became so cold that the period was called the Little Ice Age, which lasted from about 1300 to 1850. Now, if you all remember seeing pictures of George Washington crossing the Delaware back in 1770 something, 74, 75, something like that. If you all remember that when he was crossing it, it was winter time, and that the Delaware was pretty much frozen over. Okay? Well, the Delaware doesn't freeze over. All right? We've been in a solar maximum, really. We're just now turning into a solar minimum. So the Delaware doesn't normally freeze over, but it's going to start freezing over again because we're going into a minimum. All right, so if you guys look at history and you see that, you'll notice that during that time, during that grand minimum, that the Delaware was frozen over. And it's something that most people won't realize, because usually when you're studying history like that, like the Revolutionary War, you're not thinking about, climate. But it's unlikely that we'll see a return to the extreme cold from centuries ago, researchers reported in a new study. Since the modern minimum, global average temperatures have been on the rise, driven by climate change. Though a new decades-long dip in solar radiation could slow global warming somewhat, it wouldn't be much, the researchers' simultaneous simulations demonstrate. So they're saying that their simulations or their models demonstrate that global warming is so relevant that whatever cooling activity happens won't affect it very much. And I'm making these points right here, ladies and gentlemen, because the article that I read next, you're going to, it has to do with what I'm saying now. So I'm making these points that these guys are saying that their models have demonstrated that the cooling of the earth due to the sun's inactivity is not going to be affected too much, because their models say that the warming is more relevant than the cooling. Okay, I hope you guys understand that. And by the end of the incoming cooling period, temperatures would have bounced back from the temporary cool down. Sunspots, which appear as dark patches on the solar surface from where the sun's magnetic field is unusually strong, and the number of sunspots waxes and wanes in a cycle that lasts about 11 years, fueled by fluctuations in the sun's magnetic field. But during the late 17th century, the sunspots all but disappeared. This episode corresponded with a period of exceptional cold in parts of the world, which scientists have explained as being connected to the changes in solar activity. Sunspot activity was high in 2014 and has been dipping ever since, as the sun moves toward the low end of this 11-year cycle, known as the solar minimum. But a pattern of ever-decreasing sunspots over recent solar cycles resembles patterns from the past preceded grand minimum events. This similarity hints that another event may be fast approaching, the researchers reported in the study. And the scientists have estimated how intense such an event might be by analyzing close to 20 years of data recording radiation output from stars that follow cycles similar to that of the sun. Solar radiation output typically drops during a normal solar minimum, though not enough to disrupt climate patterns on Earth. However, UV radiation output during a grand minimum could mean activity plummets by an additional 7%. The researchers wrote in the study, as a result, air temperatures on Earth's surface would cool by as much as several tenths of a degree Fahrenheit. A change of a half degree Fahrenheit is equivalent to about 3/10 of a degree Celsius on average, according to the study. The study's findings will help scientists create more accurate climate model simulations to improve their understanding of the complex interplay between solar activity and climate on Earth, particularly in a warming world. The study's lead author, Dan Lubin, a research physicist with the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego, said in a statement, "We can therefore have a better idea of how changes in solar UV radiation affect climate change," he said. The findings were published online December 27th. Okay. So pretty much this article is just letting you guys know that some scientists out there have acknowledged that we are entering what's called a grand solar minimum, which is an 11-year cycle where the sun pretty much shifts gears from high gear to low gear. However, in this grand solar minimum, it's discovered by the trend that the sun is taking with sunspots that not only are we going into a solar minimum, that we're going into a grand solar minimum, which is a period of cold that lasted 300 or 400 years. Okay, so it is very likely that the cycles of the sun can get colder and colder as they go on their 11-year cycle. So for example, right now we're going into a solar minimum. Okay, so the next 11-year cycle, which is supposed to be a maximum, all right, a solar maximum where there's more sunspot activities and we get more radiant energy from the sun, all right, it will be higher than what we're getting in the minimum, but it'll still be lower than our last high. All right, so the next grand solar max, or the next solar maximum, all right, is going to have a high point that is lower than the last high point of the last solar maximum. All right, if you're following me on that. So what it means is that the maximums and the minimums are trending lower, and they're projected to be trending lower for the next several decades. All right. So one thing that I noticed about this article is that it tells you what they think is going to happen, but they don't inform you on what solutions may be, or on what we can do to get prepared. All right, or what will occur from these occurrences. For example, they're saying that the temperature is going to drop for nearly the next 50 years, roughly, all right? But they don't tell you what consequences is that going to have on the earth, all right? So they're not telling us what we can do to prepare. All they're doing is putting a problem out there without a solution, or without letting the public know this is what's going to happen because of this, okay? So pretty much you're just being kept in the blind. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, you need to do your own research. Okay, so this takes me to this next article over here. Hopefully it'll load. There we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I also want to go ahead and cover this real quick, all right? You guys can see here that I'm reading from Zero Hedge, okay? And I know in the past some people have told me, oh, you got that article from Zero Hedge. You know, Zero Hedge is a crap place. Listen, everyone's got their opinion, but this is what I have to say about that. Is right is right and wrong is wrong. Doesn't matter where you get it from. Someone that you really dislike can be telling you something that's true, but just because you dislike them doesn't mean that what they're telling you is not true. For example, I don't watch the mainstream media. I don't watch CNN. I don't watch MSNBC. I don't even watch Fox, okay? But if they're saying something that is true, it doesn't matter whether I like them or not. True is true and wrong is wrong, okay? And you need to do your own research, okay? Okay, so here I wanted to read you this article really quick. It's not that long, which is very recent, I think yesterday. It says, climate scientists admit to major math error after global warming study is debunked. Okay? Now, like I told you, this is not me trying to tell you guys that I'm for global warming or global cooling. I'm just reading you the article as it's stated here. Okay? So you can come to your own conclusion. Okay? Because I find it very convenient. All right? I find it very convenient that after decades of global warming being shoved down our throats, after decades of politicians and bureaucrats telling us that we are the reason why the earth is warming up. Sorry about this, ladies and gentlemen. It looks like my page is reloading. Hopefully it'll go back to the same article. But I'll finish my rant here. I find that after decades of bureaucrats telling us that we are the reason why the planet is warming, that now they're saying, well, we might have made an error in the calculations after the more than $1 trillion that the population has been fleeced by. All right, because more than $1 trillion has been spent on global warming. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think I lost my page. Let me see if I can find it. go. Brain. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if I'll be able to find that again. Let's see. Well, as you can see all the crazy articles here. Yeah, that's a heck of a shame right there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I can pretty much tell you what that last article, the one that I lost, read. It pretty much read that scientists that were on the global warming trend, saying that, you know, the earth is warming, this and that, whatever, they found that their models that they were using were off by more than 60%. So in other words, they're admitting that they were more than half wrong about their calculations. So you see, that's why I said that when you read something, you need to be critical of it and you need to do your own research. Because now, years after, like I said, we've been getting fleeced and we've been getting this narrative shoved down our throat that we are the reason why the earth is warming and that it has nothing to do with the sun. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a bonfire, okay, if you light up a bonfire and you are standing 5 feet away from the bonfire, right, and let's say that that's your comfort zone, okay, let's say that that's where you feel pretty comfortable. Well, what happens if you get 2 feet closer to the fire? Are you going to get warmer or hotter? You're going to get, are you going to get warmer or colder? You're going to get warmer, right? Because you're getting closer to the fire. So now what happens if you move back 5 more feet from where you were in beginning from the fire? It's going to get cooler, right? Do you think that that ball of fire that's 93 million miles away from us, that's 1,000,000 times bigger than our Earth, do you think that maybe if there were periods during the cycle where the Earth was 1,000,000 miles farther or 1,000,000 miles closer to the sun, do you think that maybe that would affect the temperature here on Earth? I mean, just doing a little bit of analysis, you know, and a little common sense would tell me that, yeah, that would affect the temperature on Earth, okay? And of course, there are many other factors involved, such as the electromagnetic field that the sun has that protects the Earth from cosmic rays coming from outer space. All right, the farther we are from the sun and the weaker that the sun is, all right, when it's going through a minimum, the less effect that the sun's magnetic field has on protecting the Earth from cosmic rays coming from outer space, which also affect the Earth's atmosphere as far as cloud production. I believe it's called nucleization. All right. So yeah, that's what that last article I wanted to cover with you guys, and it's not this one. I'm not going to read this one, but I wanted to cover that last article with you. Oh, look at this. This is another one. Here you go. Mini ice age looms as NASA scientist warns lack of sunspots could bring record cold. So you see this, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I'm getting at with this. You get a narrative shoved down your throat for decades. And now, even though they've had this information, look at this information. Look at how far back this goes. This goes all the way back to 1985, which is extremely, extremely short, all right, in climate research. 35 years or 30 years, whatever it is a very short period in climate research. But obviously, as you see this trend, when you look at this chart, it's obviously a down chart. It's obviously a downtrend. You can see that the highs were lower highs every time. We have a high here in 1990, then we have a low in 96, then we have a high in 2002, 2003 that's lower than the last high, all right? Then we have a low that's lower than the last low, and then we have another high in 2016 that's a lot lower than the last high. What do you think is going to happen to our next low? It's more likely going to be lower than our last low, and then our next high, which will be cycle 25, will be lower than our last high. It's a trend, ladies and gentlemen. It's a cycle that happens throughout the history of the planet Earth. All these cycles happened. Okay? So do your own research and be critical when you read these articles, and be even more critical when you hear someone telling you about this stuff, okay? Because I don't have an agenda. I'm just reading to you the stuff that they put out there, and then I'm trying to put a little bit of common sense into it. That way you don't get duped into thinking that it's a good idea to tax everything on Earth, to put a carbon tax on everything on Earth just because you are the problem, when you're not the problem. There's nothing that we can do about the climate cycle. Nothing that we can do about it at all. I mean, think about it. Millions of years ago, all right? Millions of years ago, the planet Earth was a lot warmer than what it is now. There were no humans. There were no cars. There were no factories, all right? There was no oil emissions. There were no bio emissions going into the air. There was no carbon going into the air because of human activity, all right? So what made it be warmer back in those times when there were really no human influence around at all? Okay? What made it get warmer? The sun. All right? Because the sun was going through a cycle. All right? I recommend that you guys visit Adapt 2030, Oppenheimer Ranch Project, Ice Age Farmer, and the Grand Solar Minimum. And I'm going to shout out a new minimum channel that I found. I forgot his name right now, but he's actually one of our subscribers that started a channel having to do with climate. All right, and I'm going to leave it off here, ladies and gentlemen, pretty quick. I probably made this video way longer than what it needs to be, but I just wanted to show you something here real quick, because just because of this picture. Oh no, that's not the picture. It was the picture of the article that I lost. You remember that little polar bear, right? That was hanging out on that little piece of ice. So I just wanted to do a really quick search. And look at how easy it is to search for information. The internet is a beautiful thing. Okay? And I just put in there, has polar bear population increased? Okay? And here we go. Since 2005, the estimated global polar bear population has risen by more than 30% to about 30,000 bears. And I think it's about 60,000 now in the year 2018. All right, far and away the highest estimate in more than 50 years. A growing number of observation studies have documented that polar bears are thriving. All right, polar bears are thriving. Okay, but they obviously have to throw in there, despite shrinking summer sea ice. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in the summertime, ice melts. Okay, so just be critical of what you read. And then I put in another one here. How many polar bears were there in 1950? In 1950, there was about 5,000 polar bears. Now there's over 30,000. Okay? And it says here, why is the polar bear population decreasing? And then it says 40%. That's the stunning population loss for polar bears in the southern Beaufort Sea. The news comes from a new study linking the dramatic decline in the polar bear subpopulation in northeast Alaska and Canada to a loss of sea ice due to climate change. Okay, so this is kind of an oxymoron here. And then I went ahead and looked up another one. The question as to how many polar bears are left in the world is still unanswered. However, global estimates of population suggest that there are around 22,000 to 31,000 polar bears remaining in natural habitat. My point is, ladies and gentlemen, is that, you know, for years they told us, oh, the polar bears are going to be extinct. The polar bears are going to be extinct. But in all actuality, since 1950, the population of polar bears has increased exponentially. All right, in 1950, there was an estimated 5,000 polar bears. Now there's 6 times as many as there were in 1950. So who came up with the idea that polar bears were going extinct when their numbers have been increasingly going up since the 50s? And that's going to be my last point. And like I said, if you can take anything away from this article or from this little conversation we had, is that it doesn't matter what someone tells you if you don't research it and find out the truth for yourself. It's going to be your truth, all right? Because you're going to eventually believe what you believe. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. My wife was making faces at me. So anyway, it's going to be your truth. You're going to believe what you're going to believe. Just don't take everything at face value. Don't take what I'm telling you at face value. Go do some research, all right? Go do some research and then come back and say, hey, AP, you were wrong about this, or this article that you read was wrong about this. Take a look at this, okay? However, I'm going to end it with this. Whether the earth is cooling, whether the earth is warming, no matter what predictions there are out there of how catastrophic these changes may be to humanity, what's the one thing you ought to be doing? That's right, you ought to be prepping. You ought to be prepping no matter what you believe. You can believe that the earth is going to be burnt up in 20 years. Well, then I hope that you're prepping a lot of sunburn lotion, all right? Or if you're going to believe that the earth is going to be cooling, then maybe you ought to be prepping some food. Maybe you ought to be prepping some water, all right? Because if the earth gets to be cooling, you know, at a higher level than what it is now, you all know that we're going to lose food production throughout the world, which has already started. Food production losses throughout the world is extremely high this year. All right, go watch the Ice Age Farmer. I highly recommend Ice Age Farmer. He's got a map where he depicts all of the crop losses throughout the entire planet, and it's incredible how many crop losses we've had in 2018 thus far. Okay, just by looking at his chart, I'm saying that in the next couple of years, maybe 3 years, the entire world will be at a deficit, meaning that we will have used up our reserves and we'll be living on what we make. And we're going to end up making less and less every year as we go in deeper into the solar minimum. So, like I always said, we've been blessed with time. It's up to you whether you use this time to prepare. And if you don't, then that's on you as well. But I hope that you heed the calling and start prepping. If you're not prepping, if you're a prepper, get somebody to prep. Help them prep. Reach one, teach one, and repeat. All right. So having said that, ladies and gentlemen, remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place, and you know that it will be a better place. Many blessings to all of you and your families. This is Alaska Prepper, and I'm out.